I was standing in the marble hallway of the country club when I heard my mother's voice drift through the reception hall doors. She was telling a group of wedding guests that the family house now belonged to the newlyweds as their gift. My stomach dropped. For 7 years, I had paid every single mortgage payment on that house, $12,000 a year. $84,000 total. My parents promised it would be mine once it was paid off. I pushed through the crowd and confronted my mother right there in the hallway. She smiled that cold smile I knew too well, and said the house was always in their name, so they could give it to whoever truly deserved it. And my sister Ashley's new husband Brandon deserved it more than I ever did. The crystal chandeliers overhead seemed to blur as my mother's words sank in. I could barely breathe. My father Frank appeared beside her, his tuxedo perfectly pressed, his expression dismissive before I even opened my mouth. "You can't do this," I managed to say, my voice shaking. "I paid for that house. Every payment for 7 years came from my account." My mother Carol adjusted her pearl necklace, that practiced gesture she used when she wanted to appear refined and in control. "Don't make a scene at your sister's wedding, Annette. This is her special day." "Special day?" I pulled out my phone with trembling hands, navigating to my banking app. "Look. Here are the statements. $12,000 every single year. $84,000 total." My father barely glanced at the screen. "That wasn't mortgage payments, sweetheart. That was rent. You lived in that house all through college and well into your 20s. Did you think housing was free? We let you stay there out of generosity, and you contributed to household expenses. That's how families work. Rent." They were calling it rent. 7 years of payments they specifically told me were going toward the mortgage, toward my future, toward building equity in what would eventually be my home. And now, retroactively, they were rewriting history. "You told me the house would be mine," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "You said once it was paid off, you would transfer the deed to my name." "You promised." Carol's expression hardened. "We never promised anything," you assumed, "and assumptions are your responsibility, not ours." I looked around the elegant hallway, at the floral arrangements that cost more than most people's monthly rent, at the ice sculpture in the corner shaped like wedding bells. Ashley's wedding had cost at least $60,000. I wondered how much of my mortgage payments had actually funded this party. "I need to talk to Ashley," I said, pushing past them. I found my sister in the bridal suite, a sprawling room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the golf course. She was touching up her makeup, still in her wedding gown, a confection of silk and lace that probably cost $8,000. "Ashley," I said, closing the door behind me. "Did you know about the house?" She met my eyes in the mirror. No surprise registered on her face, no guilt, no shock. Just a slight tightening around her mouth that told me everything I needed to know. "You knew," I whispered. She set down her lipstick and turned to face me. "Mom and Dad told us 6 months ago, right after Brandon proposed. 6 months. They had been planning this for 6 months while I continued making payments, believing I was investing in my own future." "How could you let me keep paying?" I asked. Ashley sighed, as if I were being tiresome. "Annette, you have your cabin. You bought that place 3 years ago and it's completely paid off. You're doing fine. Brandon and I are just starting out. We want to have children soon. We need the space more than you do. The cabin. My sanctuary in the mountains, a small 2-bedroom place I had saved for years to buy. 1,000 square feet of peace I had earned entirely on my own, without any help from our parents. And somehow, in Ashley's mind, that disqualified me from deserving the house I had actually paid for. "That doesn't make this right," I said. "Life isn't always about what's fair, Annette. It's about what's practical. Mom and Dad are getting older. They can't maintain that big house anymore. It makes sense to pass it on to the child who needs it most." "The child who needs it most, or the child they like best?" Ashley's face flushed. "Don't be petty. You've always been jealous that Brandon and I have what you don't. A real partnership. A future family. Maybe if you had gotten your life together, instead of focusing so much on your career, they would have made different choices." The door opened, and Brandon walked in. Tall, confident, with perfectly styled hair and that salesman smile he never seemed to turn off. He worked as a real estate agent, and he was good at it. The kind of guy who could talk anyone into anything. "Everything okay in here?" he asked, though his tone suggested he knew exactly what we were discussing. "Just fine," Ashley said quickly. Annette was just congratulating us on the house. Brandon's smile widened. "Thanks for that, Annette. Really. Ashley told me how you helped them get it paid down. That was really generous of you. Not everyone would contribute that much to help their parents, you know? It's going to make a great starter home for us." He knew. Of course he knew. They all knew, and they had all agreed this was acceptable. I was the only one who thought there was something fundamentally wrong with taking $84,000 from someone under false pretenses. "I didn't contribute to help my parents," I said slowly. "I paid the mortgage because they told me the house would be mine." Brandon exchanged a glance with Ashley. "Well, that's not really how Carol and Frank remember it. And since the house is in their name, I guess what matters is their version. Legally speaking." He had already thought through the legal angles. Of course he had. "Did you know they refinanced?" Brandon continued, pulling out his phone. "Twice, actually. Once 5 years ago and again 3 years ago. They pulled out equity both times. The house isn't actually paid off, Annette. It has about $75,000 left on the mortgage. But don't worry, Ashley and I can handle that. I make good money. And with both of us working, we'll have it paid down in no time." The room tilted. They had refinanced. My parents had taken out new loans against the house while I was paying down what I thought was the original mortgage. They had extracted money and spent it while my payments went toward a debt that kept regenerating. "What did they do with the money from the refinances?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Well, some of it went to Ashley's graduate school," Brandon said casually. "And I think Carol mentioned they took a really nice trip to Europe a few years back. Greece, Italy, all those places. Said it was a dream vacation. Good for them, right? They worked hard their whole lives. They deserve to enjoy their retirement. My payments had funded Ashley's education and my parents' vacation while I lived frugally, skipping trips and buying secondhand furniture for my cabin. Every dollar I earned went toward building what I thought was my future, and instead, I had been subsidizing everyone else's present. "I need to go," I said, turning toward the door. "Annette, wait," Ashley called out, but I was already gone. I walked through the reception hall, past the dancing guests and the open bar and the elaborate dinner buffet. My parents were at the head table, laughing with relatives. They didn't even look up as I passed. I got in my car and drove. 3 hours north, into the mountains, to my cabin. The one place that was actually, legally, undeniably mine. The cabin appeared through the pine trees just as the sun started setting behind the ridge. 1,800 square feet of rough-hewn logs and wide windows, perched on 2 acres of sloping forest land. I had closed on this property 3 years ago, paying cash from savings I had accumulated by living in what I thought was my future home while paying its mortgage. The irony tasted bitter. I unlocked the door and stepped into the quiet. No music, no voices, no expectations. Just the creak of floorboards and the settling sounds of a house in the woods. I dropped my purse on the kitchen counter and stared out the back window at the darkening trees. My phone buzzed. I ignored it. It buzzed again, and again. Finally, I looked. 12 missed calls from my mother. 7 from my father. 3 from Ashley. And 1 voicemail. I played the voicemail on speaker. "Annette, this is your mother. I don't appreciate the way you stormed out of your sister's wedding. Very dramatic and very rude. But that's not why I'm calling. Your father and I need to discuss living arrangements. We'll be up to the cabin tomorrow to talk. We should arrive around 10 in the morning. Have coffee ready." I played it again, certain I had misheard. Living arrangements? But there was no misunderstanding her tone. It was the same voice she had used throughout my childhood when issuing commands, not requests. I called her back. She answered on the first ring. "Annette." Finally. "What do you mean, living arrangements?" I asked. "We're moving in with you for a while," she said, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. "We sold most of our furniture to give Ashley and Brandon a fresh start. The house needs to be empty when they take possession next week." "You sold your furniture?" "The young couple needs everything. Couches, beds, dining set, everything. We gave it all to them. It's what parents do. Where were you planning to live? I asked, though dread was already pooling in my stomach. With you, obviously. You have 2 bedrooms up there. Your father and I only need 1. We'll bring our personal items and settle in. It makes perfect sense. No. Silence on the other end. I had never said no to my mother so flatly in my entire life. Excuse me? She finally said. No. You're not moving into my cabin. This is my home, my private space. There isn't room, and I don't want roommates. Roommates? Her voice rose. I'm your mother, Annette. We're family. And after everything we've done for you, raising you, providing for you all those years, this is how you repay us? By refusing to help when we need you? You just gave away $84,000 of my money, I said. You lied to me for 7 years, and now you want me to house you? We gave away our house to your sister, Carol corrected. Money you claim to have paid was rent for services rendered. And yes, we need somewhere to stay temporarily while we figure out our next steps. You have the space, you have the means, and you have the moral obligation. Find a hotel, I said, and hung up. My hands were shaking. I had never hung up on my mother before. Never refused her directly. The guilt came immediately. That trained response from decades of conditioning. But underneath the guilt was something else. Anger. Clean, clarifying anger. I tried to sleep but couldn't. Every sound in the cabin seemed amplified. The wind through the pines, the settling of the foundation, the distant call of an owl. At 8 the next morning, I heard an engine. I looked out the front window and saw a truck pulling a U-Haul trailer coming up my driveway. They hadn't listened. They were coming anyway. I met them outside, still in my pajamas, blocking the path to the front door. My father got out of the truck, looking older and more tired than I remembered. My mother emerged from the passenger side, wearing sunglasses despite the overcast sky. Move aside, Annette, Frank said. We need to unload. You're not unloading. I told Mom last night. You can't stay here. Don't be ridiculous, Carol said, walking toward the trailer hitch. We've already committed to this. We told everyone we were moving in with you. You told people without asking me? We shouldn't have to ask, Frank said, starting to open the trailer. This is what families do. They help each other. I stood in front of the trailer door. You don't get to decide how I use my property. This is my cabin. I bought it. I pay for it. And I'm telling you, you cannot live here. A neighbor from the cabin 3 lots over had come out onto his deck, watching the confrontation. Carol noticed and lowered her voice, but her words were no less cutting. Everyone knows now, she said quietly. Our church, our friends, all our relatives. We told them we were downsizing to help Ashley and Brandon start their family, and that our generous daughter offered us her cabin while we figure out our next chapter. If you turn us away, everyone will know what kind of person you really are. It was a trap. A social manipulation, using reputation as leverage. If I refused, I became the villain in everyone's story. The ungrateful daughter who abandoned her aging parents. Dad, I said, turning to my father, your heart is fine. You're 62 years old and in perfect health. You don't need to move in with me. You don't need my cabin. You have money from refinancing the house twice. You can rent an apartment. Frank's jaw tightened. How dare you throw that in my face? That money went to necessary expenses. A trip to Europe? Ashley's graduate school? Those were necessary? Family is necessary, Carol interjected. Investing in your sister's future is necessary. Enjoying the fruits of our labor after working 35 years is necessary. What's not necessary is your selfishness. I didn't move. Neither did they. We stood in a standoff in my driveway, the morning sun finally breaking through the clouds. If you don't let us in, Frank said slowly, you'll regret this. Is that a threat? I asked. It's a fact. Carol pulled out her phone. I'm calling Pastor Raymond right now. I'm calling Susan from the book club. I'm calling your Aunt Diane. I'm telling them all how you're treating us. Let's see how you like being the family outcast. She was serious. She started dialing, her fingers moving across the screen with theatrical precision. I felt the weight of it. The social pressure. The guilt. The years of conditioning that told me to give in, to smooth things over, to be the good daughter. But I also felt the anger. and the anger was stronger. "Make your calls," I said. "Tell whoever you want, but you're not coming into my cabin." I walked back inside and locked the door. Through the window, I watched them argue in the driveway. Carol was on the phone, pacing, her free hand gesturing wildly. Frank stood by the truck, arms crossed, staring at the cabin like he could will the door open. After 20 minutes, they got back in the truck and drove away, the trailer still attached, still full. I sat on my couch and shook. I had just burned a bridge I never imagined burning. I had refused my parents. I had chosen myself over their demands. It felt terrible and liberating at the same time. That night, I pulled out all my property documents and spread them across my kitchen table. Deed, title insurance, property survey, tax records, everything was in my name. Only my name. The cabin was mine, fully paid off, no loans, no liens, no one else on the title. They couldn't take this from me. Legally, financially, this was mine. I clung to that certainty as I tried to sleep. A week passed. I took time off work, telling my clients I needed to handle a family emergency. That was technically true, though none of them knew the details. I was a financial consultant for small businesses, helping entrepreneurs manage cash flow and avoid the kinds of financial pitfalls that destroyed companies. The irony of my specialty was not lost on me as I dealt with my own family's financial manipulation. I spent the week hiking the mountain trails near my cabin, trying to clear my head. My phone rang constantly with calls from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, all of them with opinions about my behavior. I stopped answering. On the 8th day, a courier arrived at my door with a certified letter. I signed for it, confused, then opened the envelope. Inside was a lawsuit. My parents were suing me. I read through the legal language twice, struggling to believe what I was seeing. They were claiming I had made a verbal agreement to provide them with housing at my cabin, in exchange for their financial support over the years. They were seeking either $50,000 in damages or legal occupancy rights to my property. $50,000. Or the right to move into my cabin by court order. My hands went numb. I sat down hard on my front step, the paperwork fluttering in the breeze. They were actually doing this. They were taking me to court. I called a lawyer that afternoon. Her name was Patricia Graham, and she came highly recommended by a business associate. She had short gray hair and a no-nonsense demeanor that I found oddly comforting. We met at her office in town. I brought every document I had, bank statements showing my mortgage payments, the property deed for my cabin, records of every conversation I could remember. Patricia reviewed everything methodically, taking notes. "Their case is weak," she said after an hour of review. "Verbal contracts are difficult to enforce, especially regarding real estate, and they're going to have a hard time proving any agreement when all your property documents show sole ownership with no encumbrances. So I'll win?" I asked. Patricia hesitated. "Probably. But litigation is expensive and time-consuming. Even a weak case can drag on for months. Discovery, depositions, motions, hearings. Your parents have hired Bernard Sterling. Is that bad? He's expensive. Very expensive. Which suggests either your parents have more money than they're letting on, or someone else is funding this lawsuit. Brandon. Of course. He had the money, the connections, and the motivation. If my parents got rights to my cabin, there would be one less asset for me to inherit eventually. From his perspective, this was eliminating future competition. "How much is this going to cost me?" I asked. Patricia quoted a number that made my stomach drop. $15,000, minimum. Just to defend myself. Possibly more if the case dragged on. "I don't have that kind of money readily available," I said. "I have savings, but most of it's tied up in retirement accounts. You might need to liquidate some assets," Patricia said gently. "I'm sorry. I know this isn't fair." I left her office feeling hollowed out. I was going to have to drain my savings to fight off my own parents in court. Over the next 2 weeks, I wrote retainer checks and filled out legal paperwork. Patricia filed our response to the lawsuit, denying all claims and asserting my property rights. The legal machinery began grinding forward. Then the discovery phase started. My parents' lawyer requested financial records, emails, text messages, anything that might support their claim of a verbal housing agreement. Patricia requested the same from them, and that's when we found it. Patricia called me on a Thursday afternoon, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Annette, We need to meet. Tonight if possible. I drove to her office. She had documents spread across her conference table. I found something in your parents' financial records, she said. 5 years ago they took out a home equity line of credit on the family house, the one you were paying the mortgage on. They told me about the refinances, I said. This is different. This was a separate credit line. $65,000. She slid a paper across the table. Look at the signature on the co-borrower line. I looked. The signature read Annette Cooper. My name. In what looked like my handwriting. I didn't sign this, I said. I know, but the bank has this on file. And according to the loan documents, you're legally liable as a co-borrower. The room seemed to tilt. They forged my signature? That's what it looks like. But proving forgery is difficult, especially with family members. You lived in that house at the time. The bank will argue you had access to the loan proceeds and benefited from them. I didn't benefit from anything. I didn't even know this loan existed. Patricia nodded grimly. That's what we'll argue. But Annette, this is serious. This loan is still active. They've been making minimum payments, but the principal is still $65,000. And as co-borrower, you're liable. I stared at the forged signature. My parents had used my identity, my credit, my financial stability to borrow money they never intended to pay back, and now I was on the hook for it. What did they spend the money on? I asked. Patricia flipped through more papers. Based on the timeline and what I've been able to piece together from their financial records, it looks like a significant amount went to Ashley's graduate school tuition at Columbia. The rest appears to have been spent on personal expenses. Vacations, a boat they later sold, home renovations. My sister's Ivy League education had been funded with a loan in my name. My parents' lifestyle had been subsidized by my stolen credit. Can I report this as fraud? I asked. You can, but it would mean pressing criminal charges against your parents, and even then the bank might still hold you liable. Family fraud is a gray area legally. Courts are reluctant to absolve co-borrowers when family relationships are involved. What happens if I don't pay? The bank will pursue collection. They'll come after your assets, including possibly your cabin. Your credit will be destroyed, and your parents are still suing you, which means you're fighting on two fronts. I put my head in my hands. So my options are to pay $65,000 for a loan I never authorized, or press criminal charges against my parents and possibly still be held liable anyway. Those are your options, Patricia confirmed. I'm sorry. I drove back to my cabin in a daze. The mountain road wound through thick forest, the trees pressing in on both sides. It felt claustrophobic, like the world was closing in. At home, I opened my laptop and logged into my bank accounts. I had $73,000 in savings and retirement accounts. If I paid the fraudulent loan, I would be left with $8,000. My safety net would be gone. If I didn't pay, I could lose everything anyway. I spent the night staring at spreadsheets and legal documents, trying to find a way out. There wasn't one. Every path led to financial ruin or family destruction. Or both. My phone rang at 11 at night. It was a number I didn't recognize. I answered anyway, too tired to care. Annette. It's Brandon. I almost hung up, but something made me wait. What do you want? I asked. I wanted to give you a way out, he said, his voice smooth and reasonable. This lawsuit, the debt situation, all of it, it's getting messy. And I think we both know it doesn't have to be this way. What are you talking about? If you let your parents move into the cabin, they'll drop the lawsuit. I'll talk to the bank, work out a payment plan for the loan that doesn't destroy your credit. We can all move on. You want me to give up my home in exchange for making your in-laws' legal problems go away? I want you to be reasonable, Brandon said. You're fighting a battle you can't win. The lawsuit is going to cost you everything even if you win. The debt is real whether you fight it or not. But if you cooperate, we can resolve this quietly. Family helping family. Family. They kept using that word like it meant something. And if I don't cooperate? I asked. There was a pause. Then things get worse. Much worse. I have friends in this industry, Annette. Real estate. Finance. Business circles. People talk. And right now, people are hearing some pretty concerning things about your financial integrity. It clicked. You're spreading rumors about me. I'm just letting the truth speak for itself, Brandon said. You're being sued by your parents for fraud. You're implicated in a loan you supposedly didn't know about. People draw their own conclusions. This is extortion. This is reality. You can fight it and lose everything. Or you can give your parents a place to stay and we all move forward. Think about it. He hung up. I sat in the darkness of my cabin, listening to the wind move through the pines, and realized the trap had multiple levels. The lawsuit was just the surface. They were destroying my reputation, poisoning my professional relationships, making sure that even if I won in court, I would lose in every other way that mattered. And I had 30 days to decide how to respond to the loan collection notice before the bank began formal proceedings. The rumors spread faster than I could have imagined. Within 2 weeks, 4 of my 6 business clients called to terminate their consulting contracts. The first was a boutique marketing firm I had worked with for 3 years. The owner, a woman named Jessica Turner, sounded apologetic but firm on the phone. Annette, I've really valued our work together, but I've been hearing some things that concern me. Legal troubles with your family. Questions about your own financial practices. I can't have someone managing our books who might be under investigation. Investigation? I said. Jessica, I'm not under investigation. My parents are suing me, which is completely different. And the financial issues are their fraud, not mine. I hear you, she said, though her tone suggested she didn't really. But perception matters in business. I'm sure you understand. I need to protect my company. The second client was even more direct. He ran a chain of 3 local coffee shops and didn't bother with pleasantries. Can't work with someone who's got legal problems, he said. Nothing personal. Business is business. The third and fourth clients cited vague concerns about my availability and fit with their needs. But I knew the real reason. Someone had been making calls, planting seeds of doubt. By the end of the month, I was down to 2 clients. My income had dropped by 70%. I ran the numbers and realized I had maybe 4 months of living expenses left if I was very careful. And that was before legal fees. I confronted Brandon by phone, my hands shaking with fury. Did you contact my clients? I demanded. I haven't contacted anyone, he said smoothly. But I do talk to people. I know a lot of folks in the business community. And when your name comes up, I feel obligated to share what I know. It's just the truth, Annette. The truth is that my parents forged my signature and committed loan fraud. The truth is that they're suing me because I won't let them steal my property. That's the truth. That's your version, Brandon said. Other people have heard different things. They've heard about an ungrateful daughter who refuses to help her aging parents. They've heard about someone involved in shady financial dealings with family assets. Funny how different the same story can sound depending on who tells it. You're destroying my livelihood. I'm not doing anything except having conversations. If your business relationships are that fragile, maybe that's a you problem. I wanted to scream at him, to threaten legal action. But I knew it would be useless. He was too smart, too careful. He had never said anything directly actionable, just spread strategic doubts in the right ears. My remaining 2 clients grew distant. One started questioning my invoices, asking for detailed justifications of every hour billed. The other began missing our scheduled meetings, always with apologetic excuses but clear patterns of withdrawal. I knew they would terminate the contracts soon, too. It was just a matter of time. Patricia called with more bad news. The bank had filed a motion to accelerate the loan collection process, claiming I was avoiding payment. I had 20 days to either pay in full or agree to a payment plan that would consume most of my remaining income. Can we prove the forgery? I asked. We can try. But it will require hiring a forensic handwriting expert, which costs money. And even if we prove forgery, the bank might still hold you partially liable. You lived in the house during the time period when the loan was taken out. So I'm guilty by proximity? I said. In the eyes of the bank, possibly yes. It's not fair, but it's legal reality. I hung up and sat at my kitchen table, staring at a stack of bills. Property tax on the cabin, utilities, insurance, groceries. The monthly total was $3,200 just for basic survival. With 2 unstable clients and mounting legal fees, my financial runway was shrinking fast. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. This can all go away if you just do the right thing. We're your parents. Start acting like our daughter. I deleted it without responding. That night I couldn't sleep. I pulled on a jacket and walked out onto my back deck, staring up at the stars through the pine branches. The forest was quiet, just the distant sound of the creek running through the ravine below my property. I had bought this cabin as a sanctuary, a place to escape the pressures of work and family, somewhere I could be entirely myself. Now it felt like a target, a piece of property everyone wanted to take from me. My phone rang at 2 a.m. I almost didn't answer, but I recognized the number as one of my remaining clients. Annette? It's George Patterson. He owned a small manufacturing business that made custom furniture. I'm sorry to call so late, but I wanted to reach you before anyone else did. What's going on, George? Someone called me today. A man didn't give his name. He told me you were under investigation for embezzlement of family funds, that you had stolen money from your elderly parents. He said I should check my books carefully because people like you often expanded their criminal behavior to clients. My stomach dropped. George, that's completely false. My parents are the ones who committed fraud, not me. I'm the victim here. I believe you, George said quietly. I've worked with you for 2 years. I know your character. But Annette, I can't ignore this. My business partners are scared. They're talking about pulling out of our contract with you. Who were your business partners talking to? I asked. I don't know. But whoever is spreading these stories is very convincing. They have details, dates, specifics. It sounds credible. After we hung up, I sat in the darkness and tried to think. Brandon had access to all the lawsuit details through my parents. He knew the loan numbers, the dates, the amounts. He could weave together facts and lies into a narrative that sounded convincing to people who didn't know the full context. And he was using that information to systematically destroy my professional reputation. I considered going to the police, but what would I report? That someone was having conversations about me? That people were forming negative opinions based on technically true information presented in misleading ways? There was no law against that. Patricia sent me an email at 6 a.m. with the subject line, Urgent, New Development. I opened it with dread. The bank has filed a lien against your cabin, the email read. They're claiming the property as collateral for the outstanding loan debt. We need to respond immediately, or you could face foreclosure proceedings. I read it 3 times before the words made sense. The bank was coming after my cabin. The one thing I had bought entirely on my own, with no connection to my parents, was now at risk because of their fraud. I called Patricia as soon as her office opened. How can they put a lien on property that has nothing to do with the loan? I asked. You're a co-borrower on the loan. That gives them the right to pursue your assets. It's aggressive, but it's legal. Annette, you need to either pay this debt or prove fraud convincingly enough that a court will remove your liability. And we're running out of time. How long do I have? 30 days before they can begin foreclosure proceedings. Maybe less if they push hard. I hung up and pulled out my financial spreadsheets again. I could liquidate my retirement accounts early, pay the penalties and taxes, and have just enough to cover the fraudulent loan. But that would leave me with almost nothing. No savings, no safety net, no ability to pay legal fees for the ongoing lawsuit with my parents. Or I could let the bank take my cabin, lose my home, and still have to fight the lawsuit with whatever money I had left. Neither option led anywhere good. My last remaining client, George Patterson, called that afternoon. Annette, I'm sorry, he said. My business partners voted. They want to terminate our contract. It's not personal. They're just scared. I understand, I said, though I really didn't. Thank you for trying. That left me with 0 clients, 0 income, and 30 days until I could lose my home. I sat on my back deck that evening, watching the sun set through the trees, and wondered how my life had fallen apart so completely in just 2 months. 8 weeks ago, I had a successful business, a paid-off cabin, and a family I thought loved me. Now I had nothing but debt, legal battles, and the slow realization that the people I had trusted most in the world had been exploiting me for years. My phone buzzed with another text from my mother. Last chance, Annette. Let us into the cabin and this all stops. Keep fighting and you'll lose everything. Your choice. I stared at the message for a long time. The logical part of my brain calculated the costs. Give them the cabin, lose my sanctuary, but keep something. Keep fighting. Possibly lose everything including the cabin anyway. But there was another part of me, deeper and more stubborn, that refused to surrender. That part knew if I gave in now, I would never get free. They would own me forever, always able to threaten and manipulate because I had proven I would break under enough pressure. I didn't respond to the text. Instead, I opened my laptop and started researching. If I was going to fight, I needed to fight smarter. I needed to find something, anything, that would shift the balance of power. I started with my parents' financial history, pulling every public record I could find. Property transfers, loan applications, tax liens, business registrations, hours of searching through county clerk websites and credit databases. And then, at nearly midnight, I found something, a property transfer from 20 years ago. My paternal grandmother's house, signed over to Frank and Carol Cooper. The recorded deed included a clause about elder care obligations in exchange for the transfer. I leaned closer to the screen, reading the legal language carefully. My grandmother had transferred her house to my parents with the condition that they would provide her with care and housing for the remainder of her life. But I remembered my grandmother's final years. She hadn't lived with my parents. She had been in a nursing home, estranged from the family. My parents always said she was difficult, that she had pushed everyone away. I dug deeper, finding the nursing home records through an online genealogy database. My grandmother had entered the facility 22 years ago and died there 5 years later. During that entire time, the house had been empty. My parents had sold it 2 years after she died. They had promised to care for her in exchange for her property, then warehoused her in a nursing home and kept the house anyway. It was the same pattern. Promise care. Take the asset. Break the promise. I kept searching, following threads through public records and social media. I found Frank's brother, an uncle I barely remembered. He lived in Arizona and hadn't spoken to my parents in 15 years. I found Carol's sister, estranged for over a decade, after some family dispute I had never understood. By 3 a.m, I had a picture forming. My parents had a decades-long pattern of financial manipulation within the family. They had taken advantage of my grandmother, driven away Frank's brother over some money dispute, and estranged Carol's sister under similar circumstances. I wasn't their first victim. I was just the most recent. I sent everything I had found to Patricia with a note. Does this help? Her response came at 7 a.m. Yes. Meet me at my office at 9. This changes things. Patricia's conference room table was covered with documents when I arrived. She had printed out everything I had sent her and added her own research on top of it. This is a pattern, she said without preamble. Your parents have been doing this for at least 20 years. Taking assets from family members under false pretenses, then cutting off anyone who objects. Can we use this in court? I asked. Absolutely. It goes to credibility and pattern of behavior. If we can show that your parents have a history of financial manipulation, it undermines their current lawsuit and strengthens your fraud claim regarding the loan. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. But, Patricia continued, we need to act carefully. The bank case is more urgent than the lawsuit. We're down to 28 days before potential foreclosure. What do? We need to force the bank to investigate the fraud properly. I'm going to file a detailed complaint with their fraud department, including evidence of the forged signature and your parents' pattern of behavior. We'll also file a police report. Police report? Yes. Identity theft and loan fraud are crimes. If we want the bank to take this seriously, we need law enforcement involved. The thought of pressing criminal charges against my parents made me feel sick, but I nodded. Do it. We spent the morning at the police station, filing a report. The officer taking the statement looked tired and skeptical. Family disputes are complicated, he said. Are you sure you want to pursue criminal charges? I'm sure, I said, though my voice shook. The report was filed. Patricia sent copies to the bank, along with a comprehensive package of evidence. Then we waited. 3 days later, Ashley showed up at my cabin. I saw her car pull into the driveway and felt my chest tighten. I considered not answering the door, but curiosity won out. She stood on my front step, noticeably pregnant now, her belly pressing against a loose sweater. Can I come in? She asked. I stepped aside. She walked into my living room, looking around at the simple furniture and the view of the forest through the back windows. "It's nice here," she said. "Peaceful." "What do you want, Ashley?" She sat on my couch, her hands folded over her stomach. "I wanted to talk to you. Sister to sister. Without Mom and Dad and Brandon involved." I remained standing. "Okay, talk." "I didn't know it would go this far," she said. "When they told me about giving us the house, I thought it was just a gift. I didn't realize you had been paying for it. I didn't know about the loan forgery. I didn't know Brandon was going to go after your clients. But you know now," I said. "And you're still here, still living in that house, still married to the man destroying my livelihood." "I know." She looked down at her hands. "And I'm sorry. I really am. But Annette, we're pregnant. I can't undo what's happened. I can't give back the house. Brandon and I are in too deep now. So you came here to tell me you're sorry, but you're not going to do anything to help?" "I came here to ask you to stop fighting, for everyone's sake. This is tearing the family apart. Mom is having anxiety attacks. Dad's blood pressure is through the roof. You're going to destroy everything." "I'm destroying it?" I felt anger rising hot in my chest. "They stole from me, Ashley. They forged my signature, sued me, tried to take my home. And I'm the one destroying things? You're being stubborn. You always have been. If you would just compromise, just let them stay here for a little while, this could all go away. The lawsuit would disappear. Brandon would stop the rumors. We could be a family again." I stared at my sister, this person I had grown up with, shared a room with for 18 years, and realized I didn't know her at all. Or maybe I did know her, and that was worse. "Get out," I said quietly. "Annette, get out of my house." She stood slowly, her hand on her belly. "I tried. When this all blows up, remember that I tried." She walked toward the door, then paused. "You know what your problem is? You can't see past your own selfishness. You have everything you need, but you won't share any of it. Mom and Dad aren't perfect, but they're old and they need help. But you'd rather prove you're right than do what's decent." After she left, I walked through my cabin, checking things, and noticed something odd. My file cabinet in the spare bedroom was slightly open. I always kept it locked. I checked the lock. It wasn't broken, just unlocked. Someone had opened it. Then I realized what Ashley had been doing. She hadn't come to reconcile. She had come to gather evidence for the lawsuit. While we talked, while she played the concerned sister, she had been looking around, taking mental inventory, possibly photographing things when I wasn't looking. I went through my phone photos and found it. While Ashley was in the bathroom, I had briefly stepped onto the back deck. My phone's motion sensor had captured a series of photos through the window. Ashley going through papers on my coffee table. Ashley photographing documents. Ashley opening my file cabinet. She had lied. Again. Everything was a manipulation. I forwarded the photos to Patricia with a note. Ashley was gathering evidence during her visit. "I have proof." Patricia's response was immediate. "Keep all doors and windows locked. Don't let anyone from your family onto the property. This is witness tampering at minimum." That night I got a call from the county clerk's office. They had received a filing from my parents' lawyer. Carol and Frank Cooper were claiming they had established verbal tenancy rights to my cabin dating back 3 years, that I had promised them they could live there any time, and that I was now illegally withholding their residence. It was absurd. They had never lived at my cabin, never even stayed overnight, but the filing triggered an automatic legal review process. I would have to appear in housing court to prove the cabin was solely mine and they had no tenancy rights. Another legal battle. Another set of attorney fees. Another drain on my dwindling resources. I called Patricia in a panic. "They're claiming tenancy rights now?" "It's a stall tactic," she said. "They're trying to overwhelm you with multiple legal fronts. The more you have to defend, the more it costs you, the more likely you are to settle just to make it stop." "I'm down to my last $8,000, I said. "After I pay you and deal with this new motion, I'll have nothing." "I know. I'm working as fast as I can, but the system moves slowly." My last remaining client, George Patterson, had called earlier that day. Not to terminate the contract, because that had already happened. He called to warn me. "Someone contacted the state licensing board," he said. They filed a complaint about your consulting practices. I don't know who, but they're claiming you provided fraudulent financial advice to clients. The board is opening an investigation. What? I felt like I couldn't breathe. George, that's completely false. I know it is. But investigations take time. And until it's resolved, no one is going to hire you. I'm sorry, Annette. Someone really wants to destroy you. After that call, I sat in my cabin and felt the walls closing in. No income. No savings left. Multiple legal battles. A professional investigation that could end my career even if I was cleared. And a family that wouldn't stop until I had nothing. I pulled out my laptop and looked at my options. Bankruptcy would stop the foreclosure but destroy my credit for years. Settling with my parents would save the cabin but surrender my dignity and prove that manipulation works. Fighting would cost money I didn't have, and might result in losing everything anyway. There were no good choices, just degrees of loss. My phone buzzed with a text from Brandon. Time to be smart, Annette. You've lost your clients, you're about to lose your home. Your professional reputation is gone. Give your parents what they want, and we'll make it stop. Keep fighting, and there won't be anything left to fight for. I looked at the message for a long time. He was right about one thing. I was losing. By every measurable metric, I was being destroyed, but something in me refused to quit. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was stupidity. Or maybe it was the simple realization that if I surrendered now, I would never forgive myself. I started searching online again, digging through records, looking for anything I had missed. There had to be something. Some weakness in their strategy. Some mistake they had made. I worked through the night, my eyes burning from the screen light, following lead after lead that went nowhere. Tax records, property transfers, business filings, court records. And then, at 4 a.m, I found it. Hidden in an old probate filing, I found the full documentation of my grandmother's estate. Not just the property transfer, but the conditions attached to it. My parents had signed a legal agreement to provide her with care and housing. When they violated that agreement by placing her in a nursing home against her wishes, they had breached the contract. But more importantly, I found something else. After my grandmother died, her estate had been settled. There had been other assets, a life insurance policy, and some savings bonds. Those assets were supposed to be divided among all her grandchildren, including me and Ashley. According to the probate records, Frank and Carol had been named as executors. The money was supposed to be held in trust for the grandchildren until we turned 25. I had never received anything, neither had Ashley, as far as I knew. I pulled out a calculator. The insurance policy and bonds would have been worth about $90,000 in total. Split among the grandchildren, that should have been $30,000 each for me, Ashley, and Frank's brother's son. Where had the money gone? I dug deeper and found more records. Frank and Carol had dissolved the trust early, claiming administrative costs and legal fees had consumed the funds. But the amounts they claimed were clearly inflated. Impossible. They had stolen from their own mother's estate, and they had stolen from me and Ashley in the process. I sent everything to Patricia. Found more evidence of fraud. My parents embezzled from my grandmother's estate 20 years ago. Her response came at 8 a.m. This is huge. This isn't just civil fraud. This is criminal embezzlement of estate funds. And the statute of limitations might not have run out if they concealed the theft. Get to my office as soon as you can. I drove to town with my heart pounding. For the first time since this nightmare started, I had something to fight back with. Real evidence of criminal behavior that went beyond family disputes. But I also knew that using this evidence would destroy whatever remained of my family relationships forever. If I pressed charges based on estate embezzlement, my parents could face serious criminal penalties. Prison time even. Was I willing to do that? I thought about the forged loan, the stolen house payments, the systematic destruction of my career, the attempt to take my cabin. I thought about 20 years of manipulation, of other family members driven away, of a pattern of abuse that stretched back decades. Yes, I was willing. Patricia reviewed the estate documents with the intensity of a prosecutor building a case. She made calls to colleagues who specialized in probate law, cross-referenced statutes of limitations, and built timelines. This is prosecutable. she said finally. The statute of limitations on estate embezzlement in this state is 10 years from discovery, not from the date of the crime. Since you only discovered this now, we're well within the window. What does that mean practically? I asked. It means we can file criminal complaints. And more importantly, it means we can use this pattern of criminal behavior to support your forgery claims and discredit your parents' lawsuit. A judge is going to look very differently at people with a documented history of financial crimes. Over the next week, Patricia filed a comprehensive legal package. Criminal complaints for estate embezzlement, identity theft, and loan fraud. Civil countersuits for defamation and tortious interference with my business relationships. And motions to dismiss my parents' lawsuit based on their pattern of fraudulent behavior. The response was swift and vicious. My mother called from a blocked number, screaming, "How dare you press criminal charges against us? Your own parents? We raised you, fed you, clothed you, and this is how you repay us? You stole from me," I said calmly. "You've been stealing from family members for decades. It stops now. You're going to put your elderly parents in prison? What kind of monster are you? The kind who refuses to be a victim anymore." She hung up. My father called an hour later, his voice cold and controlled. "You've made a terrible mistake," he said. "You think you've found some magic evidence. But all you've done is guarantee that you'll never have a family again. We'll fight this. And we'll win. And when we do, you'll be the one facing consequences." But his confidence sounded hollow. He was scared, and I could hear it. Brandon called too, and this time his smooth salesman voice had an edge of panic. "You need to drop these charges," he said. "Do you understand what you're doing? You're destroying Ashley's in-laws, the grandparents of our child. This is going to affect everyone. You should have thought about that before you helped them destroy my life," I said. "This isn't over," he warned. "You think you've won, but you haven't. We still have options." But he was wrong. The criminal complaints changed everything. The bank's fraud department finally took my case seriously. With police reports filed and evidence of a pattern of criminal behavior, they launched a formal investigation. The foreclosure proceedings on my cabin were put on hold pending the investigation's outcome. My parents' lawsuit started falling apart. Their lawyer, Bernard Sterling, filed a motion to withdraw from the case, citing conflicts he couldn't disclose but which I suspected related to the criminal complaints. Without expensive legal representation, my parents' claims looked even weaker. The housing court clerk reviewed the tenancy claim and dismissed it outright. The judge's written decision was scathing. The plaintiffs have provided no evidence of tenancy beyond unfounded assertions. This appears to be a transparent attempt to harass the defendant through the legal system. One by one, the walls they had built around me began crumbling. But then Brandon made his final move. I received a letter from a lawyer I didn't recognize. Brandon and Ashley were filing for custody of my potential future relationship with their child. It was a preemptive filing claiming I was an unfit aunt due to my documented mental instability, criminal allegations against family members, and dangerous living situation. It was absurd and probably unenforceable, but it was designed to hurt. To show me that even when I was winning the legal battles, they could still reach me emotionally. Patricia reviewed it and shook her head. "This is harassment, pure and simple. We can get it dismissed easily. But Annette, they're getting desperate. Desperate people do unpredictable things." She was right. 2 days later, someone tried to break into my cabin. I was in town meeting with Patricia when my neighbor called to say he had seen a truck in my driveway and someone trying to force open my back door. By the time I got home, they were gone, but the door frame was damaged. The police came and took a report. They found boot prints that didn't match my shoes. The officer said it looked like an attempted burglary but couldn't prove who was responsible. I installed security cameras that night, 4 of them, covering all approaches to the cabin. The next morning, my mother and father showed up. The cameras caught everything. They pulled into my driveway, got out of their car, and walked up to my front door. Frank tried the handle. When it didn't open, he pulled out a key and tried to insert it into the lock. It didn't work because I had changed the locks after Ashley's visit. But the attempt was clear. They had made a copy of my house key somehow, and were trying to enter my home without permission. Carol spotted the security camera. She pointed it out to Frank. They had a brief, heated conversation captured silently by the camera, then got back in their car and left. I sent the footage to Patricia. She forwarded it to the police. "That's attempted breaking and entering," she said. "With your father trying to use an unauthorized key. It might even qualify as criminal trespass." The police filed additional charges. The district attorney's office, now paying attention due to the mounting evidence, began building a case. Everything was accelerating toward a conclusion. But I still didn't know what that conclusion would be. Then the bank called. Their fraud investigation was complete. The investigator was a woman named Linda Chen, who sounded tired but professional. "Miss Cooper, after reviewing all the evidence, including the forensic handwriting analysis and the pattern of behavior documented in your attorney's filings, we've determined that your signature on the loan application was forged. We're removing you as a co-borrower and pursuing legal action against Frank and Carol Cooper for loan fraud." I almost couldn't believe it. "I'm not liable for the debt?" "You are not liable. We're also reporting this to law enforcement for prosecution. I'm sorry you had to go through this, Miss Cooper. Your parents have a significant amount of debt they'll need to answer for, both civilly and criminally." After that call, I sat in my cabin and cried, not from sadness but from relief. The crushing weight of $65,000 in fraudulent debt was gone. My cabin was safe. I had breathing room. Over the next 2 weeks, the dominoes continued to fall in my favor. The state licensing board completed its investigation into the complaint about my professional conduct. They found no evidence of wrongdoing and dismissed the complaint. The investigator noted in her report that the complaint appeared to be filed in bad faith by someone with a personal vendetta. My former clients began calling. They had heard through the business community grapevine that I was winning my legal battles, that the allegations against me were false. They apologized and asked if I would consider working with them again. I took back 3 of them. The others, I declined. I had learned to be more selective about who I worked with. The criminal cases against my parents moved forward. The district attorney offered them a plea deal, admit to the fraud charges, pay restitution, and serve probation instead of prison time. Frank and Carol refused. They hired another expensive lawyer and prepared to fight, but Brandon didn't want to fight anymore. He saw which way the wind was blowing. He quietly offered the bank a deal. He would provide evidence of Carol and Frank's financial crimes, including recorded conversations and emails showing they had deliberately defrauded multiple people, in exchange for immunity from any charges related to his role in the reputation damage campaign against me. The DA accepted. Brandon turned on his in-laws completely. The evidence he provided was devastating. Emails from Carol coaching Brandon on what to say to my clients. Text messages from Frank directing the harassment campaign. Recorded phone calls where my parents discussed using the legal system to break Annette financially and emotionally. Patricia used all of it in our countersuit for defamation and tortious interference. The case was so strong that my parents' new lawyer recommended they settle. The settlement was substantial. Frank and Carol agreed to pay me $147,000, covering my legal fees, lost income, emotional distress, and punitive damages. They dropped all lawsuits against me. They agreed to never contact me again without my explicit permission. They also had to sell the house they had given to Ashley and Brandon to pay the settlement and their legal fees. Ashley and Brandon's marriage crumbled under the pressure. They separated 3 months after their baby was born. Ashley tried to call me once, crying, asking for help with the baby. I didn't answer. Patricia had advised me to maintain no contact while the legal issues were still being resolved. But more than that, I realized I didn't want contact. These people had shown me who they really were. Ashley had participated in the scheme to destroy me. She had gathered evidence in my home under false pretenses. She had stood by while Brandon decimated my career. Family wasn't just a matter of blood. It was about respect, trust, and mutual care. And these people had destroyed all 3. The criminal cases concluded with plea deals. Frank and Carol admitted to identity theft, loan fraud, and estate embezzlement. They were sentenced to 5 years of probation, 300 hours of community service, and ordered to pay restitution to me and to my cousin whose grandmother's estate they had raided. They lost their standing in their church, their social circle, their community. People who had believed them initially now saw the truth. The reputation damage they had tried to inflict on me rebounded onto them tenfold. I ran into my mother once at a grocery store in town. She was pushing a cart, looking older and smaller than I remembered. She saw me and her face hardened. "I hope you're happy," she said. "You destroyed your family." "No," I said quietly. "You did. I just stopped letting you destroy me." She turned and walked away. I finished my shopping and drove back to my cabin, my sanctuary, my home that was truly mine now. The legal battles concluded in late autumn. The leaves had turned gold and red across the mountain, and the air carried that crisp edge that signaled winter approaching. I stood on my newly expanded back deck, looking out at the forest that had become my refuge and my victory. The settlement money had allowed me to do more than just survive. I had renovated the cabin, adding a professional office space for my consulting business. I had built the deck I was standing on, a wide platform with built-in benches and a view that stretched for miles. I had invested in my future instead of just recovering from the past. My business was thriving again. I had 7 clients now, more than before the crisis. Word had spread about how I had fought back against fraud and won. Small business owners appreciated that kind of integrity. They trusted someone who wouldn't be intimidated or manipulated. I had also started offering financial literacy workshops for domestic abuse survivors, teaching them how to protect themselves from economic manipulation and rebuild after financial abuse. It turned out my experience had value beyond my own recovery. One afternoon in November, I got a letter from Frank's brother, the uncle I had tracked down during my investigation. His name was Thomas, and he lived in Phoenix with his wife and grown children. The letter was handwritten, 3 pages long. He thanked me for pressing charges. He explained that 30 years ago, Frank and Carol had convinced him to co-sign a business loan, then defaulted on it, destroying his credit. He had lost his house and spent years rebuilding. He had cut off all contact with Frank and Carol, but always felt guilty about abandoning family. "You showed me I wasn't alone," he wrote. "You proved that their behavior was a pattern, not just something I did wrong. Thank you for being brave enough to fight back. You saved other people from becoming their next victims." I cried when I read that letter. I had spent so much time questioning whether I had done the right thing, whether pressing criminal charges against my parents was too extreme. Thomas's words gave me the answer I needed. I hadn't been cruel. I had been necessary. Carol's sister reached out too. We talked on the phone for 2 hours. She had been estranged from the family for 18 years after Carol had borrowed $15,000 from her and never repaid it. She thought she was the only one Carol had ever treated that way. We formed a strange little support group, these disconnected relatives who had all been victims of the same people. We shared stories, validated each other's experiences, and slowly built the family connections that Frank and Carol had destroyed. Ashley never contacted me again. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she and Brandon had divorced. She was living in a small apartment with the baby, working as an assistant at a law firm. Brandon had moved to another state, leaving her to raise the child alone. Part of me felt bad for her. She had been manipulated by our parents her whole life, taught that exploitation was normal, that taking from others was acceptable if you needed something. But another part of me remembered her gathering evidence in my cabin, her participation in the scheme to destroy my career, her complete lack of remorse until the consequences affected her. Some people change when they face consequences. Others just get better at playing the victim. I hoped, for her child's sake, that Ashley would figure out which person she wanted to be. One evening in December, as the first snow began to fall outside my cabin windows, I sat at my new desk and reflected on everything I had learned. I learned that family isn't determined by blood, but by respect and integrity. The people who share your DNA can be the ones who hurt you most deeply. And the people who stand by you through crisis, who support you even when it costs them something, those are your real family. Patricia, my lawyer, had become a friend. George Patterson, the client who warned me about the investigation, had introduced me to other business owners who became both clients and allies. My neighbor who called when someone tried to break into my cabin had started inviting me over for dinners. These people, connected to me only by circumstance and choice, had shown me more loyalty than the family I was born into. I learned that enabling abuse in the name of keeping peace only empowers abusers. Every time I had tried to smooth things over, to make excuses for my parents' behavior, to convince myself that family loyalty meant accepting mistreatment, I had made the problem worse. Boundaries weren't cruel. They were essential. I learned that financial abuse is real, often invisible, and devastating. Society tends to minimize it, to treat it as less serious than physical abuse. But the systematic destruction of someone's economic security, the manipulation of their trust, the exploitation of their resources, these things can destroy lives just as thoroughly as physical violence. And I learned that standing up for yourself, even when it costs you everything you thought you had, is worth it. Because what I thought I had was an illusion. The loving family, the support system, the people who would catch me if I fell, none of that had ever been real. What was real was my own strength, my ability to endure, my willingness to fight for what was right even when the fight seemed impossible. I had lost my family of origin, but I had gained something more valuable. Self-respect, financial security rebuilt on my own terms, and the knowledge that I could stand up for myself when it mattered most. The cabin around me felt different now. Not just a retreat, but a fortress. Not just a home, but a statement. I had defended this space, this life, this autonomy. And I had won. I thought about the house I had paid for, the one my parents had given away. It was gone now. Sold to pay legal fees and settlements. Ashley and Brandon had lived there for only 4 months before everything fell apart. Sometimes I wondered what would have happened if I had never stood up for myself, if I had just accepted the loss of the house, paid the fraudulent loan, let my parents move into my cabin. Would I have peace, or would I have just been signing up for a lifetime of exploitation? I knew the answer. The pattern would have continued. They would have taken the cabin eventually, found new ways to extract money and resources, trained me to accept less and less until there was nothing left of me at all. I had broken the pattern. And in breaking it, I had freed not just myself, but potentially future victims. My parents were on probation. Their financial crimes documented. They couldn't easily manipulate others now. As snow continued to fall outside, I made myself tea and sat on my couch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the forest turn white and quiet. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. I was free, and that was worth everything I had lost. The next morning, I woke to 3 feet of snow and a power outage. I bundled up, lit a fire in the wood stove, and spent the day reading by firelight. The cabin stayed warm. The propane stove still worked. I had prepared for this. I had prepared for a lot of things now. That evening, as power returned and the lights flickered back on, I opened my laptop and checked my email. There was a message from a new potential client, a woman who ran a bakery and needed help with her financial planning. There was also a message from a domestic violence shelter where I had offered to teach financial literacy workshops. They wanted to schedule my first class. And there was a message from Patricia, just checking in, making sure I was okay in the storm. I responded to all 3 messages, making plans, building connections, moving forward. The story people wanted me to tell was one of reconciliation. They wanted me to say that my family came back together, that we all learned lessons and forgave each other, that love conquered all. But that wasn't my story. My story was about recognizing that some relationships are toxic beyond repair, and that walking away from them isn't failure. It's survival. My story was about rebuilding from rubble, about finding strength in the middle of destruction, about refusing to be a victim, even when every system seemed designed to make you one. My story was about a woman who paid for a house she never got to keep, who fought off a family that tried to take everything else, and who ended up with something better than she started with, a life that was entirely her own. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at my snow-covered forest, my mountain, my sanctuary. This was my ending, not the one anyone expected, but the one I had earned, and I was finally, truly, home. Now I want to ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where family members took advantage of your trust? Where the people who were supposed to protect you were actually the ones exploiting you? How did you handle it? Did you fight back, or did you walk away? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else who's facing the same impossible choices I faced. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button. It helps others find these stories, and maybe find the courage to stand up for themselves too. Subscribe to hear more stories about real people fighting back against injustice and winning. And share this with anyone who might need to hear that it's okay to set boundaries, even with family. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it gave you something to think about. Maybe even some courage. If you're facing your own battles, remember that your worth isn't determined by how much you're willing to sacrifice for people who don't value you. Your worth is inherent, and you deserve to protect it. Stay strong, stand up for yourself, and never let anyone make you feel guilty for refusing to be exploited. Take care of yourselves out there.